Hello, this week we're going to be looking at Anglo-Saxon beliefs. We're going to think about why the Anglo-Saxons might have had more than one god, discuss the influence of paganism, and look at the arrival of Christianity. So if we look at this timeline, it says approximately how long had the Anglo-Saxons been in Britain when they converted to Christianity? Well, if we look carefully, we've got the Anglo-Saxons arriving here. This is sort of just before 500 AD, and this conversion is happening here, which looks like that's 750. Looks like that might be about 600. So we're looking like just over 100 years or so before they converted to Christianity. So to begin with, the Anglo-Saxons were following pagan religions, and this was very similar to the Norse religions, which we will look at some more after half term, but which you may know a little bit about already. Pagan religions often worship many gods and goddesses, and nature plays a big part. Anglo-Saxon religions tended to focus on values that were important to warriors, like courage and bravery. So why was it important to be a good warrior? Apart from being brave, what else does a warrior need to be? Well, obviously at that time there was a lot of war going on, and for the Anglo-Saxons, therefore, being a good warrior was important. We talked about how even people who were farmers would have at some certain times been called up to fight as warriors as well. I guess as well as bravery, you need to be strong, you need to be loyal, you'd need to be ready to fight when you had to. All sorts of things that a warrior would need. So why did these pagans have more than one god, and do you know any of them? You will be surprised perhaps that you do know some of them. The early Anglo-Saxons in Britain had pagan gods and goddesses of things that were important to them. So apart from war, what other two things were important to the Anglo-Saxons that they might have a god or a goddess for? So war is just one aspect of life. Think about the other things people do, the other things people need, the other things people need to get those things that they need. And can you think of two things that pagans might have had gods for and why? Make a quick note in your book. So believe it or not, we hear about Anglo-Saxon and Norse gods all the time. Here are our days of the week. Now, let's think, where do those names come from? If you like, you could even pause this video and do a little bit of online research as to why the days of the week have their name. So let's have a look. Let's see if this is a surprise. So Monday, Mani, the moon, he was a Norse god. Tuesday, Tyr, the god of war, another Norse god. Wednesday, Woden, king of the gods, also known as Odin and Wotan and various other names. Thursday, named after Thor, the god of thunder, who I'm sure a lot of you have heard of from the Marvel Comics version. Friday, Freya, goddess of marriage, Freya, Frey, various versions of her, also a Norse god. So far I think we're entirely Norse gods. Saturday, or Anglo-Saxon gods. Saturn, who is a Roman god, and Sunday is named for the sun. So 5 out of our 7 days are named after gods that the Anglo-Saxons would have worshipped, and we've kept those names to this day. Interesting things that they're gods of. War we talked about, someone's in charge. Thunder, the weather would have been very important to them because they were farmers as well, and sailors. Marriage, important. I suppose you would have farming, you would have water and fire and things like that, I guess. Blacksmiths, I think there was a god for. So where the Anglo-Saxons had settled in the south and east of Britain, the people were generally pagan. That means that they worshipped these Anglo-Saxon Norse gods and goddesses, a whole bunch of them. In areas where they hadn't settled, like Wales, Christianity was still a big part of life. Remember, the Romans had already converted to Christianity and brought that to Britain before they left. In AD 596, the Roman Christian Church sent missionaries to convert the Anglo-Saxons to Christianity. So missionaries are people who go to places where the people are not Christian, and they try and convince them to become Christian. The missionaries were led by a monk called Augustine. So why did the church decide to send them? According to Bede, it happened when Pope Gregory came across a group of Anglo-Saxon slave children in Rome. The Pope was told that these children were Angles, and he is supposed to have said, not Angles, but angels. It seems strange that he would say that because that's English and he was Italian and would have probably spoke some sort of Latin. Maybe it's the same. When he learned the children were pagan, he sent missionaries to convert the Anglo-Saxons to Christianity. So he sort of saw these children and thought these children should be Christians. So he sent people to try and sort that out. That's what I would say. So we're going to watch a little video now about how gradually a number of people helped with the conversion of Britain to Christianity.
How was Christianity introduced to Britain? Here are three super saints, Augustine, Columba and Aidan, who have more than just their itchy outfits in common. These lads turned the pagans in Britain, who believed in many gods, into Christians who believed in just one. Let's start with Columba, a fearless saint. In 563, he sailed to Iona and set up a monastery, and from here, many people in Scotland converted to Christianity. But if we look at the rest of Britain, things aren't looking too great for the Christians. This lot are still pagan. Next up was Augustine in 597. He was sent to England by the Pope. He converted a king, built Canterbury Cathedral, and was very pleased with himself. Unfortunately, he mainly just converted the king's best mates to Christianity. Most ordinary Anglo-Saxons thought he was a bit weird with his haircut and his itchy dress, and they carried on believing in their old gods. So much for Augustine. Aidan to the rescue. He was determined to go out and convert the Anglo-Saxons. He set up a monastery on Lindisfarne in 634, and from there he did something amazing, something unheard of, something brilliant. He spoke to ordinary people. This is what actually convinced the Anglo-Saxons to stop being pagan and give Christianity a try. And there you have it, how these three saints and these three places helped Britain make the shift from many gods to just one. You can keep your rubbish robes to yourselves, though, lads.
So as we saw, Augustine is one of these monks. He went to visit King Ethelbert, the pagan king of Kent. He had actually married a Christian princess named Bertha, and sort of Bertha and Augustine teamed up and converted Ethelbert. Ethelbert's a very good Saxon name. So as we saw in the film, it took a little while for everyone to kind of convert to Christianity, but by 700 AD it was a big part of life and everyone was expected to go to church. Kings who became Christian expected their followers to convert too. So the church in England at that time was organised around minsters, which were places where a group of priests, monks and nuns organised worship. So a kind of a church where those people lived as well. A bit like, I suppose, the forerunner of a monastery or something like that. Minsters were set up by the king, and they expected in return that the nuns and the monks would pray for them, especially in times of trouble or war. This is Minster Abbey in Kent. I think that's on the Isle of Sheppey, and I think I've been there. It's an Anglo-Saxon minster, and it still survives, and nuns still live there today. So their main job, these nuns and monks, was to say prayers, attend daily services, and the rest of the time they'd work on the farm attached to the minster. Some monks and nuns were also teachers. Unlike most people at the time, monks and nuns could read and write. So once Britain became Christian again, we have more written texts. Why do you think that is? Have a think. I'll talk about it in a second. So before we move on to this, obviously, if we've got these monks and nuns who are learning to write, they're not just going to write religious writing, like copies of the Bible and things. They're also going to write down what's going on. They're going to write down about history and things like that. So we get more stuff written once the Anglo-Saxons convert to Christianity. Now, it wasn't easy, especially as we saw in the film. The ordinary people didn't want to give up their pagan gods and goddesses, but gradually they did. It took about 100 years. Now, this is the interesting bit. How did these monks convince the pagans to become Christian? How do you think they claimed that Christianity was somehow better than paganism? I mean, that's what they must have done. No one wants to change to something that's worse than what they've already got. Have a think. Perhaps do a little bit of research online, and then we'll talk about it in a second. Right. What we know about these pagan religions, for example, let's just think of one thing. They believed that when a warrior died in battle, he would go to Valhalla, this hall of the warriors in Asgard, and they would train and fight for this big battle at the end of time called Ragnarok. So it was very important to them to be brave, to be warriors, to have these gods of war and fighting, and it was important for them to die doing something brave in the field of battle. And that's all well and good if, you know, you're doing lots of fighting and battling, but things have got a lot more peaceful. And I imagine the monks would have turned around and said, well, do you really want to be dying a warrior's death when you could actually become a Christian? And as long as you do the right thing and as long as you confess your sins, you'll get to go to heaven. And there's no fighting, there's no training for Ragnarok. It's just a paradise up there. And I imagine people might think, oh, that's a good idea. And also, we have to remember that if the lords and the king were Christians, then perhaps some people might think, well, if I want to be in favour with them, if I want them to help me, then perhaps I should become a Christian as well. So there are a few reasons. Perhaps you can find out some more. So, draw a little table in your book. Do some research. Find out what things about Christianity you think the people back then would have been attracted to, and what things about paganism. There's lots of resources if you search for kind of Key Stage 2 Anglo-Saxon religion or Anglo-Saxon beliefs. Let's see what we can find out. Okay, when you've done that, I want you to imagine that you are a Christian monk, like this guy. I want you to write a short speech to convince some pagans to convert to Christianity. Think about those techniques we used in our persuasive writing last week. Can you use some of those persuasive openers, some of those rhetorical questions, that flattery, all those kinds of things? It'd be really interesting to see what you can do. Now, take your time over this because there's only one topic lesson this week, and it would be really good if you could do some of your own research to find out about these things. And I will look forward to seeing what you come up with. Thanks, bye.